Hello, I'm Steve Combs, and this is the News Guardian Report, podcast number 3. Last time we were talking about what goes on in college classrooms and how professors sometimes use the classroom to indoctrinate their students in the professor's own ideology. And today we're going to carry on that conversation in a little bit different direction.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I've noticed in my experience as a student is the lack of drive students have to engage their professors, and how most of them remain passive and don't want to learn about anything that's not a bulleted item on the curriculum.
Yeah, it starts in high school, maybe even earlier than high school. Keep in mind that a good student in high school is a passive student, a quiet student, one who does not argue, who does not challenge. Now there are exceptions to this, of course. There's some great schools where this doesn't hold, but that's
where they encourage it.
That's the norm.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've had students tell me, I do polls of my new students every semester. I've had students more than once tell me, you can actually get in trouble for doing that, for challenging a teacher. And what is the purpose of the academy? The purpose of the academy of college is the inquiry into truth. And so you want to have these robust discussions and debates, and students have to be free to challenge the professor's assumptions and those of other students without feeling like they're being disrespectful. It takes about half the semester for me to get students to think that way, because they come to college from high school wanting to just sit and take some notes, and they don't want to say anything
be passive,
like you say, and just tell me what's going to be on the test, and then they'll maybe take some notes or expect you to give them the notes in a handout before the test, and then parrot that back. And that's unfortunate, because that's not a good use of anybody's time or money on that.
Yeah.
So that's what we have to try to get over, and it's more of a challenge for those of us who teach freshmen, first year students, because they're new.
Right, because after then you'd have time to condition them better.
That's right, and part of it's age. I've had older students. I had a student once who was 68.
Oh.
He was older than I was at the time. Retired police officer. He didn't have any such problem. Because he lived for a long time and done a lot of things, you see. And even though he was a brand new college student, he had never gone to college. And that was a good model for the rest of the class.
Do you think this is something that we're going to deal with from here on out?
Probably, unless high school suddenly change. I wouldn't look for that. I wouldn't look for that to happen anytime real soon. But I've taught a little high school. I taught 2 years of high school, and I was a substitute for 3 years. And I always tried to do some things in the high school classroom that I had done in college, and some things you can do and some you can't, of course.
Right.
But in high school, it's a real challenge, because they're really not used to that kind of thing. If a teacher says, "What do you think?" They're not used to it.
They don't think.
What do you mean think? They're not used to that. And it reminds me of a study that was done by Rebecca Cox, who wrote a book called The College Fear Factor. And the subtitle is something like How Students and Professors Don't Understand Each Other. Cox went around the country for 5 years sitting in on freshman comp writing classes, posing as a student, actually. And she interviewed hundreds of students, lots of faculty, and confirmed what you said in the opening, that so many students just want this passive thing where they come into class, open their notebooks, take notes or not, listen to the lecture or ignore it, but not have to do anything, not have any obligation.
Clock in and clock out.
That's right, clock in and clock out. It's exactly that. And this is really regrettable, because it's just not what we're supposed to be doing in college. The one thing I wanted to talk about was kind of kind of what I do, writing, teaching writing. And it's related to what we're talking about, is that students in freshman year in college come into the course, the writing course, not knowing what it's about or why they're in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's not something that they see as a part of their education. It's something that they have to get out of the way so that they can then go get their education. It's not an experience that has any relation to what they're going to be doing in the studying of pre-medicine or biology or economics or history or computer science. It's a hurdle to clear, an ordeal to be endured. And
do you think we should remove this from the list of required courses?
I'd like to. We should at least have the debate about it. It's a great question. 50 years ago, some guy, I can't remember his name, but he was a professor. He wrote an article, not 50 years ago, 65 years ago, in the 1950s, wrote an article saying that freshman composition was a complete waste, and that we shouldn't do it. That all classes are writing classes, and that all teachers ought to be having their students write. You should be doing lots of writing, maybe not lots of writing in every class, but in the school over a semester, lots of writing, and that you learn to write about economics and history and math and science and things like that. I kind of think so. You would have to have some kind of maybe a 3-week boot camp in grammar, basic sentence structure and things like that. And there's an argument against that too. There are people who in the academy in these ranks who write about this kind of stuff who say, no, you're not going to erase this neglect that these people have endured their entire school lives in a 2 or 3 week course, but it would be a start. And I'm talking about just learning how to write grammatically correct sentences, to know the parts of speech, and importantly, how words fit together in a sentence. Every word in a sentence is a member of a team, and they all fit together, and they all have to work together. And so many students don't have any concept of that. They have no idea what you're talking about when you try to explain that. And so you'd have to maybe have some of that. It's really remedial, because they should have learned it in about the 6th grade,
right?
5th or 6th grade. But anyway, that's a debate that I would love to be a part of.
Sure.
And there are good arguments on both sides.
And I'd love to hear from our listeners if they have any.
That would be great if we could get people to comment on this kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
It would be really pretty cool. But I think that students in these writing courses would do better if they knew what the purpose of the class was.
Oh, absolutely.
And they come in and they don't know. And I'll ask the students, in high school, did you ever ask the teacher, Mrs. English teacher, why are we writing this essay? Why are we writing this paper? And the answer, if you don't get in trouble for asking it, is because I said so.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a good answer. That's not an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I've looked at this a lot. I've talked to a lot of students about this. And I'm convinced that if students understood that the purpose of writing in school is to learn, that we write about things, to take ownership of those, as we write about these ideas, we take ownership of those ideas. We can be articulate in explaining them. And if you can write a 3/4 of a page on some subject that you're researching without consulting your notes, or if you can stand up in front of the classroom for a minute and talk about a subject without repeating yourself, that you're beginning to develop some level of authority. And this just builds on itself as you, and it's really tough in freshman comp, because they're writing about all kinds of different things, and they're not writing about any certain subjects. They're there to write, and they may be writing about 10 or 15 different things. But when you get into engineering, then you're going to be writing about engineering matters and economics and so forth. And so the writing should get maybe just a little bit easier as you go up, as you climb up the ladder, even though it never gets easier. But I just conclude this by saying that students would do, I'm convinced that they will do better when they understand that the purpose of writing is to learn. And I don't think, it's never been explained to them, they don't understand it. And what they need to do is sort of think of themselves, when they're writing a paper, is think of it writing not so much for the teacher, but for themselves.
But for them.
I'm writing this for me. That as I write about this, I'm beginning to learn. There would be less plagiarism, because students would understand that this is how I'm learning. This is, I'm not worried about, copying something off the internet that'll please the teacher. But I'm going to do some serious research, and I'm really going to learn this, and I'm going to write about it, and I'm going to begin to understand it. The final thing I just wanted to put on this is that the late poet laureate of Great Britain, Cecil Day Lewis was his name, back in about 1970, I think he was the poet laureate, once explained his writing, and he said, when I sit down at my desk to write, I'm paraphrasing here, when I sit down at my desk to write, I write not to be understood, but to understand. In other words, it was sort of a polite way of saying, dear reader, yes, you're important, and I hope you like what I wrote, but I'm really not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me.
That's good. Well,
Okay.
Thank you for that, Steve.
That was great.
All right. Well, we'd love
Thank
to
you.
hear your feedback, and if you have any comments, drop those in the comment section below. If you have any ideas, please send us an email, and we'll catch you next time.
Yes, sir.